This is More Than Therapy podcast. More than therapy. This is More Than Therapy. More Than Therapy podcast. This is More Than Therapy. More Than Therapy podcast. This is More Than Therapy podcast. And welcome to another episode of More Than Therapy podcast. Today's special guest is Mrs. Elliott. Mrs. Elliott has a coaching style that draws from work as a life, spiritual, and relationship coach and focuses on a path that leads to growth and healing. She walks with you as you explore your thoughts, feelings, and experiences in a safe and judgment-free environment. She uses a variety of gentle but highly effective coaching techniques to help you find your truth and let go of the blocks that have been holding you back. Her goal is to support her clients as they work to gain self-understanding and self-awareness. But you are the expert in your experience, and she's there to facilitate the process of your own exploration and growth, and she is committed to your journey. On today's episode of the More Than Therapy podcast, she will talk to us about abusive brain chatter and whether or not, if you are staying with an emotional abuser, whether or not you are the emotional abuser based on that abusive brain chatter. Today's special guest, Mrs. Elliott.
Well, hello.
Hello.
Great intro.
Thank you for coming on the More Than Therapy podcast show today. Your story, your innovative way to address trauma, especially emotional trauma, the emotional trauma that we often experience and then re-experience within ourselves. You know what I'm saying? That negative self-talk, it can be the most damning thing in supervision. I'm talking to a couple of my supervisees about that negative self-talk that they tell themselves as it comes in preparation for their exam or moving to the next level in their career. So it's a damning thing. That mind, I told somebody the other day, the mind is a very interesting thing. The brain is a very interesting thing. You have to be very, very mindful of what you tell it.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So tell us first, of course, you're going to tell us about the ABC program, but what you're going to remember, what you're going to tell us is what led to it, right?
Well, yeah, I can basically just share with you quickly my story.
Okay.
And my story was that I used to talk to myself just horribly. And it came from, some of my core beliefs, some of what my parents taught me. And what school people tell you at school, we just start talking to ourselves to protect ourselves. And that voice is there often to protect us, but it can get really, really loud. And mine got very, very loud. And I found myself one day in bed with a remote control in one hand and a box of frosted mini wheats in the other hand, just watching TV, binge watching TV and binge eating. And the voice was telling me just horrible things that I would never change. I'd never get out of bed. I'd never, I was a terrible parent. It was really, really bad that day. And I realized that moment, I had to find a different voice. That for 42 years, I've been listening to this voice, and this voice was not taking me where I wanted to go. This voice was taking me into addiction. And so that's when I started my journey of self-healing and growth. And what I learned as I went on was to be kinder to myself. In 12-step programs, they talk about making amends to ourselves for the way I talked to myself, for the way I treated myself. And then I became, after I became a successful businesswoman, which I never could have done before. When I was laying in bed, I was telling myself I was going nowhere. I was never going to make enough money. And when I finally got the help I needed to go in and challenge my thinking and change my thinking, and I found a spiritual center, then I was able to open my own business, and it grew into a wonderful business that I was able to sell. And then I started thinking about all of the people like me who maybe needed help with that talk and who weren't able to understand what it was, So I thought, well, I'm going to become a life coach, and I'm going to show other people how to do this. And then as part of the life coaching, I became a spiritual coach, because I found that even with life coaching, that until you can get to that really kind, loving voice, until you can get to whatever your higher power is, whether it's love and beauty or whatever it is, that you're not going to be able to change, because your voice, that voice in your head, is going to hold you back. It's there to protect you. It doesn't want you to fail. So it's going to really start chirping loudly. And so I became a spiritual coach so I could take clients even further into that journey. And then what I found, Felipe, is that my clients were exhibiting a lot of abusive brain chatter. When they came in, initially our first few sessions would be, about them setting goals and what they wanted to do in their life, and, helping them find that dream. But as we got further into the coaching process, the block was their own mind, their own fear that would chat and chatter away. So I started really working on abusive brain chatter. It's my life's work. I feel like it's so important. And as you said at the beginning, we all chatter, right? I mean, that's the natural. I mean, the statistics are astounding when you think about them. I think there's a statistic that in my research for my book that, we have 12,000 thoughts a day, which I think is a lot. But, even if we break it in half and say we have 6,000 thoughts a day, of those, they say 80% are negative. So that's a lot of chatter, right? And so I think, the emotional abuse part was an important piece for me. And that's why I bring it into my work. When I realized that all the things I was saying to myself were emotional abuse, they were something that an abuser would do. When I looked up what, emotional abuse was, I found out it was bullying. Well, how many times do you call yourself stupid or weak, or, whatever name we call ourselves? And belittling, that's another sign of emotional abuse. And that's dismissing yourself, saying, oh, I'm not that good. Oh, that wasn't that good. Somebody says, oh boy, that song was wonderful. You sang beautiful. No, it wasn't that good. That's belittling yourself. And negatively commenting on your looks. That's a huge one for women, especially. We just turn on Zoom and we immediately start the chatter, right? What's going to start chatter quicker than going on Zoom and looking at your wrinkles and looking at whatever it is that you see, or looking at a photo? So that's another form of emotional abuse. And then there's gaslighting. That's and I know a lot of clients, when they come to me, they need reality checks, because they're telling themselves they're not sure if it's them or if it's other people. I set a boundary, but they crossed this boundary. Was that me? Should I have set a larger boundary? They're always questioning themselves and gaslighting themselves. And then the last one is isolating, which is what I did, and which a lot of abusers do. I mean, that's what that's what people do when they overeat. They're isolating. They stay home. They don't participate. They use substances like drugs or pornography. I mean, if you're sitting in front of your screen, just scrolling pornography, you're not out there living in the world. You're maybe you're isolating. So those are the things that we need to pay attention to when we're looking and listening to what our brain says. And that's why this became my life's work, and why I am writing this book, healing the ABCs, healing abusive brain chatter using the ABCs. So, Felipe, I came up with just a quick ABC, just as a reminder for my clients, so that they would know how to kind of get through it quickly. Once we did the work, there's work to be done. It's not as simple as ABC. But this is how I work with my clients. I do the ABCs. Would you like to know the ABCs, or I can do them now and share with you that, A stands for awareness. Be aware of what you're saying to yourself. That's so important. I set a timer on my phone that pops up and says, "What are you thinking? What are you feeling?" Because I just want to make sure. I want to check in with myself. What is the dialogue? What is happening? What am I telling myself? So that's the first part. Even if I write it down, even if you just start writing it down for a few days, what am I saying to myself? What negative thoughts am I saying? Just kind of do it as an observer, right? And then the second step, the B of the ABCs, is believe. And this is where the spiritual work comes in. Because what I found and what I find with my clients is there's no way that I could have cured my brain. I couldn't change my brain with my brain. I needed to have a higher voice that I could rely on. And that June day, 28 years ago, I got on my knees. And I'm not a religious person, but I got on my knees and I said, I can't listen anymore. I need to hear a kind of voice. I need some guidance. And so that B, that believe, learning how to find that kinder, softer, gentler voice. And I have a lot of clients who don't believe in God. They don't believe in, they're not spiritual, they're not religious, and that's okay. No one says you have to be. But if you're tapping in, if you're quieting your mind and what you're hearing is chatter, is something that's telling you you're not good enough, or something that's not supporting you, then you haven't tapped into the belief that you need to tap into. You need to tap into a higher thought in order to combat that abusive brain chatter. And then, of course, the C part of it is challenge. Challenge your core beliefs, because our core beliefs are what gets our abusive brain chatter going, right? If you think you're not good enough, well, your abusive brain chatter is going to start running with it. And we all come up with these core beliefs. I mean, we have, for example, in my life, I had a core belief. My mother was always trying to fix me. She always, taking me on diets and taking me to plastic surgeons. And, I had this belief that I wasn't good enough, that who I showed up with wasn't pretty enough. It wasn't good enough. And then the further belief from my mother was that I had to be all of those things in order to be in a happy, successful relationship. So my core belief was that I wasn't good enough. So I was not, I got into bad relationships because I was just trying to fill myself, because I didn't have a core belief that I deserved anything other than the crumbs that somebody would give me. So the C part is really, really important. What are your core beliefs? Write them down. What beliefs did you get that don't serve you? In coaching, I have a process where I actually help my clients kind of let those go spiritually. It's like, you have a core belief. Where did you get it? Who gave it to you? Do you want to hold on to that? Is that a belief you want to hold today? And if it's not a belief that you want to hold today, then let's challenge it. Right?
Indeed. It's just amazing just how much negative dialogue people tell themselves day to day, whether it's our clients, whether it's people we love, whether it's people that we work with. Core beliefs, oftentimes false beliefs, 99% of the time false beliefs. You know what I'm saying? Funny how oftentimes we're our worst enemy. An interaction you may have with somebody, like, oh, they think this about me, or they don't like me, or they're going to fire me, or this or that. And then that's just your own projection a lot of the times. But with that projection and with that thought process, you start moving yourself in behaviors that can manifest that reality. So
Wonderful point. Wonderful point. I bring up the idea in the book I write about something called tornado head, which is part of this abusive brain chatter, and it's exactly what you were talking about. And it's usually triggered by fear or shame. Right. The quickest way to get me in my head and spinning is if I feel shame. And that happens. People shame us, and we have to really be aware of that. Just, is that their stuff? Is that my stuff? But I call it tornado head because it starts like with my clients, it starts like this. I will say something like, so how did last week go? What goal, we set these goals. How did you do on your goals? And they'll say, well, I didn't do my journaling. I know I was going to, but I really didn't do it. And I didn't get to the gym. And, the problem is that I just, sometimes I just don't have any motivation. It's because I don't think a lot of, it's because I was never allowed to do anything, and I was never good enough. And my mother used to, tell me that I couldn't do things. And so then, of course, when I go to work and I get criticized at work, then I start, feeling this really, and so they start talking really more quickly, and it starts spinning. It starts spinning around until they start saying, and it was my grandmother, and she used to do that to my mother. And, then I'm going to have to go home. My husband's going to be upset. And pretty soon, Toto, you're not in Kansas anymore. And that's what I'll say to my clients is like, wow, wait a minute. How did we get there? Well, they felt a little shame about not doing what they thought they should do, right? And I don't should anybody. It's like, my goal is to help you examine this, to figure this out. I'm walking with you here. If you didn't do it, let's figure out what was difficult for you so that you can do it. So the shame is, this feeling that they feel because they think they should have done it a certain way. And then they start this tornado head. And tornado head is so damaging because it piles on. It's like you just start with one thing and then you pile on. And if I'm not careful with my clients, we end up spending a session on something that was piled on rather than let's go back. Let's go back to that initial thing and let's unpack that, right? And so I tell my clients, and I love it when I say, stay out of tornado head. Just identify it. Just say, oops, I'm in tornado head. I'm picking up more stuff. And if you can pay attention to that, sometimes my clients will come back and go, yeah, I was doing this. And then I got into tornado head, but I just stopped. I didn't do it. I just stopped myself. And that's part of that awareness of what your brain is doing without judgment. There are no shoulds. You're not good or bad if you do it. It's just something that we do as people that we have to retrain, right?
indeed. What is your philosophy on personal growth and development?
Wow, that's a great question. Personal growth, I think, starts when we're very young. And the beauty of aging and the stages of aging really help us. We're always growing. We're always growing. And I want to tell you, if you're young, it's hard. It's hard to be young now. And but it gets better because we keep growing and we keep learning. And as we grow, we begin to take back who we are. So on a spiritual level, I'll tell you what my spiritual philosophy is. My spiritual philosophy is that we come into this earth as a beautiful soul. It's just this, this beautiful, unvarnished soul. And somewhere in our childhood, things happen to us and we start shutting down that soul. And we start, covering it up and keeping it hidden because it's not safe anymore. It's not safe to think the way you think. It's not safe to show up the way you show up. I had a suicidal mother, and I learned at a very young age that I had to behave a certain way. Otherwise, I was at risk of losing my mother. And so I had to just shut down my soul and be a good girl. Otherwise, mom would die, right? So that was something that happened to me. And so throughout my life, I completely stopped listening to myself. I started people pleasing. I'm sure there's a lot of people who can identify with people pleasing, right? It's about manipulating people to like me. And that's because I have no sense of who I am, no sense of self, because I've stopped it. My job now is just protecting that soul. I mean, it's just keeping it, under wraps. And when I keep it under wraps, I'm not free to grow, to explore, to be who I am. And for me, the food, when as a food addict, the food was a great way to stuff all of that down and keep my soul protected. Because as long as I could just, keep myself insulated and isolated, nothing was going to hurt me. But on the sad part of it is that Jacquie never got to show up. So what I say is that the growth is when we start to go back and unpack that and find that soul. When we start finding that, we made these agreements with our parents that we were going to be a certain way and they were going to love us. When we start realizing that it's okay to show up in the world, when we start taking the chances, when we start challenging our core beliefs, when we do our ABCs, when we're aware of how we think, what we're saying to ourselves, when we change our belief to a belief that's more loving and kind, and when we challenge those core beliefs, then we're growing. That's personal growth. That's a lot of growth. And that's what we need to do as we age. Because when we start aging out, now I'm 70, so so it was real important for me at this stage in my life that I go back and reclaim my soul. So that's some of the work that I do. It's I take people back and I take them back to that time that they had to hide it. And we kind of bring it back together along with whatever spiritual guide, God, Gaia, Jesus, Mother Mary, higher power, I don't the Glinda, the Witch of the West, whatever it is, and bring it back and say, okay, now this is yours. Your family, everything else that you kept this hidden so you could survive. But now this soul is yours now, and you're responsible for it, which means that you have to grow and you have to examine everything, how it relates to your soul. So, for example, I had somebody who was having a struggle with a family member, and she didn't know whether she should do something that it took care of her or took care of her family member. And she was very torn about it. And so what I said was, what is going to nourish your soul? Which decision is going to grow your soul? Because that's your responsibility now. That's our responsibility when we take it back. And it takes many years. I have a client in their 20s, and she amazes me because, people in their 20s, that's a tough lesson. That's hard because you don't really have that life experience. But as you start getting into your 40s and 50s, you start to understand that the chains that you put on yourself are not serving you anymore. And you start feeling like you want to become your authentic self. And I think that personal growth at that point is about spirituality, about finding that soul and about nourishing it. What values do you have in your life now? You don't have to take on your parents' values. You can have your own values. And this is your soul, and you get to do with it what you want. And I think when you follow that path, that's where personal growth and development happens. That's the magic.
Indeed, indeed. As a life coach, how you've been doing life coaching for a while and you figured out a formula to help people overcome their negative self-talk. Their negative self-talk is oftentimes what leads them to therapy, leads them to despair, leads them to not only mental health anguish, but in my field, addictions. You do so via workshops, right? Speaking engagements. You do one-on-one life coaching, relationship coaching, another avenue that could cause despair, because if the persons don't have like values or values that are comparable to each other's, especially after they have children, whew, boy, can that throw a curveball in the relationship and cause some turmoil. And
You know,
spiritual
yeah, go
coaching,
ahead. Go
and
ahead.
spiritual coaching, like you said before, I know people in my practice who a lot of their anguish comes from, I don't know, them being in such a tight tunnel vision work regarding their religious beliefs when they were coming up, and now as they grow and their minds expand and they learn more about what religion truly is and how the world is differed, and was mainly religion is based on cultural, basis across the whole planet, and they'll see that the church is not always serving them, and then they have all this anguish. Why is the preacher rich and have a Bentley and lives in a mansion, and I'm giving 10% or more for tithes, and I'm not prospering, so yeah.
Well, you raised a couple of points, if I may address them. One is the relationship coaching. And what I want to say about that is that the reason I became a relationship coach, and I don't do a lot of it, but it comes up in the work that I do in terms of boundaries. People who are people pleasers and who've had to hide out and who have abusive brain chatter, they don't have good boundaries. They don't know how to set boundaries. And so so that's a lot of the work I do. It's like, it's okay to show up, and there's really a kind way to ask for what you want and set your boundary. You don't have to give in to other people because you're afraid they're not going to like you. They're going to like you more when you stand up for yourself, when you show up, and when you say, I teach this technique called the embrace technique, where you start with saying how you feel about something. Like, when you come into, I just want to share with you that when you come into work late, I start getting anxious that the work isn't going to get done. So I'd like to ask would it be possible this week for you to start coming in at exactly 9 o'clock for us to get started? Would that work for you? And then wait, and they may say yes or no, whatever. But the idea is that there you set a boundary, and it was, and it was done in a kind way. You don't have to say, you've got to come in at 9 o'clock and you're really upsetting me. And, you don't have to do that. There's ways through relationship coaching that you can show up as you. So that's the thing. And the Bill of Rights, you have a right to show up. You have a right to be heard. There's a saying I heard. It's like, if one of us has to be angry, why not be you? Right? But I think as people pleasers and codependents, a lot of times they think it's easier for me to be angry because I can deal with it. If they're angry, then they might reject me. And that's even worse. I can't deal with that. So that is the part of relationship coaching that I love to do, that I love to bring into my practice. So that's the one thing. And the other thing we were talking about, the idea that, let's see, I think I lost my second train of thought there
Spirituality.
is spirituality. Thank you. You're so right. A lot of the people who come to me, I've had people come to me and say, don't talk to me about God. I was, God, how could the Holocaust happen if there was a God? And, again, what I say is, that if you're finding a God that's punishing, and if you grew up with a punishing God, then maybe that's not the God you want. But guess what? You might be able to get to create your own God. Have you ever, and then I have them sit quietly and tune in. We do a little bit of that work and start tuning into themselves. That voice that says, yes, oh, I should be doing that. Or the voice that says, no, don't do that. Don't do that. But you don't listen to it. Well, you can use that voice. It can simply be your higher self. You don't have to say God. You can say higher self, higher power. I need to tune into that. I need to pause. I need to listen. Because if you don't, what I challenge my clients to say is, why are you here then? I mean, if you feel like you can figure it out on your own without any higher thinking or higher power, what are we doing here? What we're doing here is you've asked me to come help walk you through how to live your life the best way you want to live it, and how to reach your goals, and how to become that better person. Well, I'm here to tell you that you are not going to become that better person if you're stuck in your mind. We have to find that place inside of you, and I just like to call it spiritual. Like I said, I know somebody who calls it love and beauty. I know somebody who calls it Mother Mary. I had a client who absolutely had she had religion trauma, and I couldn't even mention anything close to it. But when we did our visualizations, and when you quiet your mind and you kind of find that voice, she found the voice of Glinda. From the Wizard of Oz. She, when we came out of the meditation, she says, I just saw this big bubble coming, and this big, beautiful, Glinda the witch. And so the work that we do is we start talking to it. Well, what is it saying to you? And that's all you have to do. That's it. If you think that's a big hurdle you have to cross, I say, quiet your mind for a moment. Take yourself somewhere, do it in a meditation, and ask yourself a question. And journaling is a great way to do this. Journaling is one of the best ways to get in touch with your source or your higher power or whatever it is. Write down, ask yourself the question, and then pause and wait for the answer to come. And if the answer is punitive, or part of your abusive brain chatter is telling you you're not good enough, you haven't found your spirit. Quiet yourself a little bit more. And, I'm comfortable calling my spirit God, whatever. We all have our own ideas and image. And when I do my meditation, I have my own idea of what that is. But I write myself Dear God letters. This is a suggestion I give people. Write yourself a Dear Me letter, a Dear Higher Self, if you can't accept God. But you have to be able to find your higher self. Just don't go into what do they say? Don't go into a gunfight with a knife. And that's what you're doing when you're going in here trying to rationalize with your thinking. You're trying to, get rash when you're trying to challenge your core beliefs. I mean, they're going to outsmart you every time. They've been doing it for how many years, however many years you are. So don't go in there with that mind. Get support, get help. Get spiritual counseling, get coaching, get a sponsor. Trust that it is in there, and that your job is to mine it, to leave space and open up so that you can hear it. And, that's what I say to people when they say that they're, I don't believe in God. Well, no one says you have to. But if you want to change, and if you want to keep going the way you're going, then listen to your brain. But if you want to change, you have to listen to a higher self, a higher power, something higher than those waves going around in your head.
Indeed, indeed. Go to a short commercial break and we'll be right back.
I can't breathe. I have migraines, numbness, weight loss. I live with it every day. The illness that I'm suffering from is an anxiety disorder, and it deserves to be treated like any other illness. But it's not.
Hey, boss. No
I said I'm fine.
See you in the morning with the frosted Superman, but it wasn't on it, and we lost it.
You can talk to me.
It's been really, really hard for me.
More Than Therapy. Today's episode featuring Jacquie Elliott, Healing the Abusive Brain Chatter. And you can find out more at healingabc.com. All right.
I just want to say those commercials are fabulous. That's kind of in keeping with what I'm saying, words, lyrics, words or more.
Yeah.
Find a way, just find a way into that, into yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Indeed. Remembering your ABCs. What are the ABCs and how do we remember them?
Well, yeah, the motivation is that you don't want to do this anymore. When we set goals, by the way, I do want to mention that on the first Monday of the month, I have a free Zoom motivation workshop where people hop on Zoom at 5:30 Pacific time, and it's free for an hour, and we set goals, and then we get in touch with our motivation. So the motivation often leads to the ABCs. It's like, well, why aren't you doing this? Why can't you? If say you want to find a new job, what's motivating you? Well, I want to be better. I want to find a new job. I want to get, I want to make more money. Oh, that's a huge one. Money mindset. What's our money mindset? And I do have some sheets on my website about money mindset, and they're free, so you can just go online. But money mindset is a huge one. I don't think I'm worthy of making a lot of money. I can't make more money. That's a really big mindset. So we'll start with something small, like, okay, what's your goal? Well, my goal is to make more money. Well, let's break that down. Let's break it down into smaller steps. So what is your mindset about money? What is money to you? Well, money is, my parents thought money was horrible and all of that. So we have to start challenging that belief. Is that true? Is money horrible, or does money give you freedom and power or whatever it is that you need? So you kind of go through that and you ask the whys. Why? Why do I want to make more money? Why do I want to write this book? Why? We get to the motivation, and then you start taking the steps to doing it. You break them down to really small steps. But if you find that you're not doing them week after week, or something's happening, and what do they say about New Year's resolutions? I think today's the day where most people give up their resolutions, right? What is it, the 20s something or the 17th or something? That's because we stop. Something has come into our brain where our chatter's starting to chat and telling us, well, it's not that important to me, or I really can't do it. I'm never really going to be thin anyway. So why am I even bothering to fix my, eat my food right? So that's the first thing, is get really in touch with your motivation. What is it that you want to do? And if you want to do something, then you're going to have to challenge. You're going to have to challenge your core belief. And so the first part is being aware. That's the ABCs. Remember, the aware, believe, and challenge your core belief. So if you're not reaching your goals, start with the A's. Start being aware, like, oh, okay, when did I stop? When did that goal stop becoming important to me? And then start remembering your motivation. Okay, so I wanted to do that. I wanted to lose weight because I want to feel better, or I wanted to make more money because it's going to allow me to pay bills and I won't be so nervous. Okay. So you start becoming aware of what you're saying to yourself and what your motivation is. Then you start, again, you go to that belief. We have to, the power of affirmations is huge. There's so much science behind it. Sometimes our brain gets confused as to what's the truth and what's not the truth. I mean, athletes know this. They know that if they need to hit that ball, they're visualizing themselves hitting that ball out of the park, right? They're visualizing it, they're seeing themselves. And the brain sometimes doesn't know the difference. It's kind of thinking, oh, maybe I did that or I didn't do that. You know how when you have a dream and you think it's real, but it isn't real, because sometimes it tricks the brain, right? The neuroplasticity in the brain kind of, gets tricky. And so, the idea of believing and finding that belief is really important. So that's the A, B. And then again, as we talked about before, challenging your core beliefs. So at this point, you might say, wow, I didn't reach my goal. What is my core belief about that goal? Well, if it's about money, I have a core belief that I don't deserve it. I have a core belief that only my father could make money, that I can't make more money than my father. I have a core belief that I don't deserve to make more money. And you start writing those down, and then you start taking steps to change them. I have a wonderful story that I'm writing in my book about. I had this core belief that I was weak. I had severe asthma as a child. And I believed that I was weak and I just couldn't do things like other people. And I always wanted to be an athlete. And I was always so envious of people who joined marathons. And I said to myself, let me, I'm going to challenge this core belief. So I signed up for a triathlon, which was absolutely insane because I'm not an athlete. And the idea of me, swimming, what was it? A swimming 2K and biking 25K and walking 5K was utterly ridiculous. But I felt like I really wanted to do this. I really wanted to show myself that it's not about me not being good enough. It's about preparation. So I prepared endlessly for this marathon and this triathlon. And I swam and I did all these things. And then of course the day came and I bought a wetsuit and I got into the water and I started swimming, and my wetsuit filled up with water and I was going nowhere. And I had to be rescued from the water, from the lifeguard. And I was devastated. But before I got in, I said, look, can I finish this even if I didn't make it? Because in my mind, what I did is I reframed it. I reframed it to the fact that I swam 2K. I just swam in one place because I was in the water for about 20 minutes, but I just wasn't moving. So I said to myself, okay, I swam the 2K. So once I got to land, I got on my bike and I rode my bike, and I ride my bike. So that wasn't a problem. And then came the walking part. And by that time I was exhausted, the running part. And I said, okay, I'm going to walk or I'm going to crawl, whatever it takes. I'm going to challenge this core belief that I can finish a triathlon, that, that I can do this. And Felipe, I came in dead last. They were waiting to open up the coast highway. The police were behind, just kind of like waiting as I almost crawled to the finish line, and they dropped the finish line and I went through it and the traffic started flowing. And I thought to myself, wow, this was such a good learning lesson. It's about reframing my core beliefs. So if I wanted to say, oh, you failed, I got pushed out of the water, look at you, you're such a loser. I didn't. My goal was to complete a triathlon, and I kept every step of the way. I had to reframe my goal until I did it. But every time you achieve a goal, you get a little hit of dopamine. So it's really important to set those small goals and hit them.
So inspiring, so inspiring. HealingABC.com is where they can find out more about your movement and the work that you bring to the table. Let's look at that website real quick, if you don't mind. Here's this masterpiece. In fact, let me take this banner off so I can see it just a little bit better. There you go. This is your website, beautifully designed. I'm jealous. You do. You have workshops and retreat services to help, testimonials, about me section, the self-help worksheets, ABCs, and a blog. You have some advertisement right here at the very top. I love how you did that. Tell us
Yeah.
about this vision board
Well,
workshop.
that just actually happened last week. I had a
Hmm.
workshop where we went in and we created a vision board. And if you've never done a vision board, I highly recommend for people. It's a great way to do that. Creating a vision and being aware of what you want and believing, that's that B part. So you take magazines and you tear out pages from the magazines, whatever speaks to you, and you get a big poster board, and then you start gluing things on them. You don't think, you get out of your head, and you start, if Hawaii calls to you or a clean closet calls to you, you don't think about it, you just put it on your vision board. And then when you're done, you start seeing what you value, and you put that up in front of you. Like my vision board's like right up here, I see it every single day. And I just I start doing the things that are on my vision board. If I put on there I wanted to change the way I dress or start adding color to my wardrobe, well, I'm wearing purple now. That was one of my vision board things. So, it's a wonderful thing to do, and you can do it at home. And just the idea is to just kind of let yourself go and have fun with it. So, but what's going in place in that, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I have to get with my website designer, is the Motivation Monday. That's going to be on there next, because you're going to be able to, like I said, go on my website and click on the workshops, and you're going to be able to join this Motivation Monday for free on Zoom. And it is and if it's not there today, I promise you it'll be there tomorrow, because I'm going to get that up there. There's Motivational Monday, right? So what you do is, we're going to be on Zoom, and you're going to pick that goal that we talked about, and we're going to go in breakout rooms, and you're going to start breaking it down. You're going to start breaking down why do you want to do this? What's the motivation? You're going to actually see yourself doing it, and then you're going to set goals and be accountable. And the next time you come, the following month, we're going to see, how did you do? What stood in your way? Let's keep you motivated. Let's break it down even more. So 3 days of meditation is too much for you. We discovered that. Okay, so how about if we just this month do 1 day of meditation? You know what I mean? The idea is, don't beat yourself up because you didn't reach your goal. Change your goal. Bring the bar down. Like when you do limbo. Remember when you used to do limbo? Just bring the bar up. And when it gets too low, you're going to knock the bar off. So don't bring it that low. Just keep it up there where you can limbo under it. So anybody's invited to that. And I hope, if you're listening to this, that that you take advantage of it, because it's just something I do for free. And I'm not going to sell you. I don't, like I said, I take very few clients, because I put a lot into my coaching. So it's not that I'm looking for clients or anything like that. I just really, really want to help people reach their goals.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you for coming on the More Than Therapy podcast. For those that want to know more about the ABCs and not letting your negative thoughts be the controller of your life, and having better dialogue in order to have better outcomes in your life, go to healingabc.com. Learn more about Miss Jacquie Elliott and participate in her Motivational Mondays, because that seems like that's a free gift, and that's the gift that keeps on giving, right, Miss Jacquie?
That's right.
And that's healingabc.com to sign up. There's a number of, videos and things, and a 3-minute deep meditation, and different nuggets to address your wellness and your recovery. You have on your Mondays, those at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, I assume.
The first Monday, the first Monday of the month, yeah.
All right. And self-help worksheets. I'm always in the hunt for some worksheets. So that's another thing you can get at healingabc.com. And you met today with Miss Jacquie Elliott on the More Than Therapy podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe. to the More Than Therapy podcast, and you can do so by pushing play and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. That's the More Than Therapy podcast. Be well and be great.